Federal investigators have their hands full trying to spot all of the fraud schemes that cost the government billions every year. Imagine artificial intelligence-powered fraud and its potential for mischief. For more on that potential and how to stop it, Federal News Network's Eric White spoke to the Vice President and Head of Public Sector Strategy at Socure, Jordan Burris.
In recent years, what we've effectively seen is the continued rise in prevalence of sophisticated attacks to what would be our nation's, identity infrastructure in particular, right? And so, I recognize that a lot of the actions by the administration or even those of Congress are those that they've been talking about for quite a bit of time. And I'm, for one, glad to see them starting to take action in this space.
What are some of these schemes, I guess, that are AI powered? Is there, any human engineering involved whatsoever? Or, is it just a lot of code just going after other lines of code?
Right. So would love to say that we were at a place where it's like the Terminator and AI is just thinking for itself. But generally, these are things that have been put into motion based on the actions of individuals at the end of the day. Right. So what we're seeing is that, AI is being used at scale to think about it to accelerate activities that otherwise would be once manual and tedious. This could be everything from generating fake personas and identities to creating what would be images that allow for impersonation. In particular, this could be, taking and finding ways to scramble, create PII and submit those on websites in order to intercept government benefits, for an example, especially those who are using weaker controls in particular. And so think of it as more of a tool. And unfortunately, when it comes to, nation state actors or the criminal organizations, they're using this now more than ever to scale what they had been doing historically.
Yeah. Is this a system failure or is there some human error involved as well? Because, personally, I can usually tell when I'm not talking to a real person.
It's always very interesting. And so when we made the decision as a society to kind of embrace digital as a, predominant channel for interacting, right? And we did this as consumers in particular, right? Because it was easier, it was more seamless for us. We kind of did away with some of that interaction that used to take place in person, all right? So you would always have to show up either at your bank or go and engage with some at your local grocery store, even in some cases to participate in good and service. It was no different in government in particular. Now, I, for one, am not advocating to say that, hey, let's go back to things being very manual, because I would never actually get anything done. I'm absolutely terrible in some cases running errands around my house. But when we did away with that, we kind of still relied on some of those processes as they had been constructed at that moment in time, right? This reliance on whether it be government issue documents as they've been provided, the reliance on holding on to things such as our Social Security numbers and pretending that for some reason they've never been compromised or revealed in a data breach in some way, shape, or form, and other elements of our PII. And as such, a lot of the, we'll say, preventative measures that have been put in place historically have not evolved, right? And that has left us more susceptible. Now, I always hate to go back and look at the pandemic as a thing, but as a turning point or a turning moment for what happens with the digital ecosystem, that is kind of where you saw a lot of these controls start to break down or became more prevalent and understood the challenge that was going to be had, right? And this is what's led to billions of dollars in fraud today across a number of sectors, to include that of the public sector as well.
We're speaking with Jordan Burris. He is the head of public sector strategy for Socure. And so let's talk controls. What can be done to stop these new schemes that are popping up? Is it going to require an evolution of those controls that are already in place, or is some new technology going to have to be implemented?
So first and foremost, I think there's like a mindset shift that is required when it comes to this conversation, right? A lot of what the government has done or others have done is take I'm going to say a pay and chase approach to this problem, right? Because the thought was always that, hey, if we, got the funds out quickly, or if we, made sure that the users on the other end of the screen ultimately got their benefit, in the event we got it wrong in any way, shape, or form, right, that we could claw that money back. Well, that continues to prove out over time. It's not easy to get this money back. Actually, a number, larger amounts of funding that have been issued to individuals, the government regular reports on how, even though they're increasing what would be law enforcement activities in order to recover it, they're only able to get but a fraction back of those funds. And so with shifting that mindset to away from pay a chase, then it's about taking preventative measures to see what we can do up front. Now, part of the discussion has been if we layer in too much security and we do too many things up front, unfortunately, we are going to put undue burden on the public when it comes to interacting and engaging with any digital system, right? How many times do you really want to be asked to take a picture of your driver's license in order to prove who you are, right? Or to take some other type of step, or to show up in person, or have a phone call into a call center, right? That becomes too burdensome. The reality is it doesn't even have to be that way, right? I would say that's even in cases a legacy mindset shift that's taken place, no different than when we were talking about migrating technology platforms from being on premise and moving them to the cloud. We actually had to rethink what it meant to restructure our technology solutions. We have to rethink what prevention may mean at scale and how you can actually be able to assess the risk of an individual doing so passively and only introducing some of these more burdensome checks or friction points when absolutely necessary to validating who they are, right? And so that becomes kind of the new discipline, the new art, if you will, that comes with, being able to prove out individuals' identities. And it's something that, much of what the administration is, starting to call for is understanding we need to be taking some of these more preventative measures right out of the gate.
Yeah, I can only identify the pictures with bicycles in them so many times, Jordan, that after a while I get a little flustered. And also it's a zero-sum game for the hackers themselves now, right? Because these tools have made it not only cheaper, but as you mentioned, less costly in time. So even if they're only able to get a fraction of what they take in a ransomware scheme or something like that, it's all profit, right?
Absolutely. And the interesting piece about them is that they're, of course, using it to funnel back into their criminal enterprises in order to continue to scale their offerings in particular, right? And note, they're not doing this alone. They're sharing insights with each other, right? They're discussing what happens and how certain solutions, systems, services that are being delivered, how they're porous, and effectively how every single person who wants to partake in that type of scheme can actually engage with it in order to intercept benefits in particular, right? So they're highly networked. They're getting more and more sophisticated over time. To your point, the cost is going down in their ability to execute these attacks. And so more so now than ever, we need to be thinking about what we be layering up front in order to basically fight back, right? Fight back with the same tools that are being used to circumvent our existing online services.
Jordan Burris is Vice President and Head of Public Sector Strategy at Socure, speaking with Federal News Network's Eric White. Find this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive and subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.